On 13th October this year, the over a decade-long thirst to create a cooperation framework agreement by the Nile riparian countries was quenched after the African Union confirmed the framework. This was after the 6 of the member states of Burundi, Ethiopia, Rwanda, South Sudan, Tanzania and Uganda enacted and ratified the cooperation agreement with a majority vote.
This is a very positive step actually for the Nile Basin, because compared to working without an agreement, is actually more, unreliable, and it doesn't actually promote, because there is no institution, there is no, legally, established institution. So which means that it's a positive step towards cooperation.
The goal of the deal, which was negotiated by nations that border the Nile, is to use the river for the good of all, guaranteeing its fair and sustainable usage for future generations. In other words, by encouraging transboundary collaboration, the Cooperation Framework Agreement guarantees that all riparian states have a say in how the river's resources are managed.
As a shared resource, there are standards of cooperation that you must understand. Number one is that if one is to develop a project, there are requirements. For example, environmental, transboundary environmental impact assessment. There's what they call like consultation, prior consultation. So all of those are the standards that are provided under international law, which will provide exchange of information, notification in case of an emergency. So all of those are very important aspects.
There have existed other agreements pertaining the access and usage of the Nile, like the 1920 exchange of notes between the United Kingdom and Egyptian government, and the 1959 Nile Waters Agreement between Egypt and Sudan. However, over the years, these have promoted historical disparities in access to the Nile's waters.
Even we have even what they call the One Falls Agreement, where there is even an Egyptian engineer that monitors the flow, of the waters, of the Nile. But of course, that started from the colonial period, because those agreements were signed by Britain on behalf of the colonialists. Historically, Egypt believes, that's what they call the historical rights, believes that they have no rights.
We want a cooperative usage of the water, but others, for what I consider to be selfish reasons, want cooperative management. Now, cooperative management means you don't touch the water. It's like you being thirsty, but a river, a tap passes outside your house. Would you like that? We want to collectively use the water in a manner that does not deprive anybody by reason of location of their water needs.
Even with these glaring disparities, Egypt and Sudan are yet to find merit in ratifying to the Cooperation Framework Agreement. Makerere University's Professor of Law, Emmanuel Kasimbazi, and former Uganda's ambassador to Japan, Martinez Mwangusho, contend that, though it's not surprising, it is a sign of their lack of goodwill.
The Nile is not about to stop flowing, madam. We don't have the capacity to stop it, and nobody has the capacity to swallow all the water. So what is the problem? Lack of goodwill.
The countries have their sovereign right. So the only challenge, of course, is the finance, whereby you see the parties' agreements are supposed to contribute. Contribute, which means that when they contribute, they should be able to run the affairs of the Secretariat, as provided under the agreement.
So, how does Egypt and Sudan's persistent refusal to cooperate affect the implementation of the Cooperation Framework Agreement?
Politically, it has challenges, because these other countries are not parties. Politically, it's a challenge because they cannot work together. But that does not mean these other countries cannot work together. And that has happened, actually, in other rivers. For example, the Mekong The Mekong, China didn't ratify the treaty. As a result, actually, that has compelled China to participate, in the cooperative, arrangements as an observer, and it has worked.
The entry into force of the Cooperation Framework Agreement marks the establishment of the Nile River Basin Commission, which will manage and safeguard the Nile's resources for the benefit of all. This transition triggers the move from the Nile Basin Initiative to the River Basin Commission, whose primary objectives are to promote the principles of the Cooperation Framework Agreement, foster cooperation among Nile Basin states, facilitate closer cooperation in social, economic and cultural fields, and act as a forum for resolving disputes related to the Nile's water usage.
One of the biggest challenges is the succession of assets, because under the agreements is that the assets of the Nile Basin should be translated to the Nile Basin Commission. Now, the biggest challenge there is that before 2010, Egypt and Sudan were contributing to the assets of the Nile Basin Commission. Now, since they are not parties to the agreement, one of the legal issues there is that how will they benefit from the assets? Then will now the parties to the agreement transfer some of the assets to those countries? So it's still, I think, a challenge. The assets really. I think that's where really a legal issue may arise. Especially Egypt, arguing that yes, we contributed to this and we need a share. So how do you determine? Because at that time they were working as a party. So how do you determine you share this, you share this? So I think that is one of the challenges that the countries need to discuss carefully. Otherwise, it may be a legal problem.
In the interim, the 6 agreeing countries are encouraged to work tooth and nail and ensure they leverage the opportunities that come with the Cooperation Framework Agreement for the development and well-being of over the 250 million people residing in the Nile Basin. There are 11 riparian countries that include Burundi, Democratic Republic of Congo, Egypt, Ethiopia, Kenya, Rwanda, South Sudan, Sudan, Tanzania and Uganda, with Eritrea, which participates in the Nile Cooperation as observer. Dorcas Kimono, UBC News.